$34 trillion. That is not just a number scrolling at the bottom of a news screen. It is not just a statistic economists debate on television panels. It is a structural weight sitting quietly behind the most powerful economy in the world. Right now, the United States carries more than $34 trillion in national debt, and every single second that number increases. The real question is not whether America can handle debt today. The real question is whether this level of borrowing is beginning to reshape global power in ways most people have not fully understood yet. Welcome to GEO Economic Insight. On this channel, we break down U.S. foreign policy, the global economy, monetary systems, and world history, not as separate topics, but as parts of one interconnected system. Because when you connect debt to geopolitics, when you connect monetary policy to military power, when you connect history to present-day finance, you start seeing patterns that daily headlines completely miss. If you value serious analysis without panic and without partisan shouting, make sure you subscribe now. These conversations are about long-term structural shifts, not short-term drama, and understanding them gives you an advantage most people never develop. For nearly 80 years, the United States has stood at the center of the global financial order. After World War II, the Bretton Woods system anchored global trade to the dollar. Even when the gold standard ended in 1971, the dollar did not collapse. Instead, it evolved into something even more powerful. A fully fiat global reserve currency backed not by gold, but by economic strength, institutional trust, and geopolitical dominance. Oil was priced in dollars. International contracts cleared in dollars. Central banks held dollars as reserves. U.S. Treasury bonds became the safest asset in the global system. That structure gave America extraordinary flexibility. When crises erupt anywhere in the world, investors move money into the United States. When uncertainty rises, capital seeks the safety of treasuries. When emerging markets shake, the dollar strengthens. That is not normal. That is structural privilege. And that privilege allowed the United States to borrow at levels that would destabilize most other countries. But privilege depends on confidence, and confidence depends on sustainability. Debt itself is not automatically dangerous. The United States has carried debt through wars, recessions, and expansions. The real issue is the relationship between debt growth and economic growth. When debt grows faster than the economy for extended periods, strain builds beneath the surface. Today, interest payments on U.S. debt are rising sharply. As interest rates increased to fight inflation, the cost of servicing existing obligations climbed. That means more federal revenue is being redirected toward interest rather than investment. America is still strong. It is still dominant. But its financial flexibility is tightening. And flexibility is power. In geopolitics, the ability to respond quickly to conflict, recession, or strategic opportunity without destabilizing your own economy is a form of leverage. If financial obligations grow large enough, they quietly limit strategic options. That is where debt becomes geopolitical. Now look at the global stage. The world today is multipolar. China has expanded its economic influence through trade corridors and investment partnerships. Regional blocs are strengthening. Some countries are exploring settlement systems that reduce dependence on the dollar. None of this means the dollar is collapsing tomorrow. The US dollar remains the dominant reserve currency by a wide margin. But what is changing is behavior. Nations are hedging. They are building alternatives slowly, cautiously, strategically. Every time financial sanctions are used as tools of foreign policy, they demonstrate American power. But they also remind other countries that access to the dollar system can be restricted. That creates incentives for diversification. Parallel systems do not replace dominance overnight. They reduce absolute dependence gradually. And gradual reduction of dependence is how global power slowly redistributes. The Treasury market sits at the center of this entire system. U.S. government bonds are not just domestic debt instruments. They are foundational assets for global finance. Banks rely on them. Pension funds rely on them. Central banks hold them in reserves. As long as global demand remains strong, the United States can finance deficits smoothly. But persistent deficits require constant issuance of new bonds. If buyers demand higher yields to absorb that supply, borrowing costs increase. Higher borrowing costs expand deficits further. This creates long-term fiscal pressure. This is not an alarmist scenario. It is a structural equation. Supply, demand, and confidence interact over time. If growth remains strong and productivity expands, the debt burden becomes manageable relative to output. But if growth slows while obligations continue rising, trade-offs intensify. Political decisions become more constrained, markets become more sensitive. History offers important perspective. The British Empire once dominated global finance, and the pound sterling functioned as the world's reserve currency. Over decades, war spending, debt accumulation, and shifting industrial power gradually weakened Britain's financial centrality. The transition toward dollar dominance was not a sudden collapse. It was a gradual rebalancing as economic gravity shifted. Today, the United States still holds unmatched advantages in capital markets, technology, and military reach. But no system remains static forever. In a multipolar world, fiscal credibility becomes a strategic asset. When a nation demonstrates long-term sustainability, it strengthens its monetary influence. When fiscal imbalances persist without reform, uncertainty grows slowly beneath the surface. The dollar's dominance allows the United States to operate with greater borrowing tolerance than most countries. But tolerance does not mean infinity. The significance of $34 trillion lies in trajectory. It signals that long-term fiscal management will shape America's future influence. If structural reforms stabilize the debt-to-GDP ratio while growth remains innovative and competitive, global confidence remains intact. If deficits continue expanding without credible adjustment, the pressure builds quietly. The conversation is not about collapse. It is about strategic positioning. Can America maintain economic dynamism while managing fiscal sustainability in a world where competitors are rising and alliances are shifting? That is the real geopolitical question behind the debt figure. Global power rarely disappears overnight. It evolves through capital flows, currency settlements, trade agreements, and institutional trust. The United States remains extraordinarily powerful. Its financial markets are deep. Its technology sector leads the world. Its energy capacity has strengthened. Its institutions, despite political debate, continue functioning at scale. But leadership requires adaptation. Debt at this level forces serious long-term planning. It requires balancing domestic priorities with global commitments. It requires recognizing that monetary credibility supports diplomatic strength. It requires understanding that the global economy is not static, but constantly adjusting to structural incentives. So here's the question that matters for the next decade. Will the United States adapt its fiscal trajectory while preserving innovation and growth, or will persistent structural deficits gradually narrow its strategic flexibility in an increasingly competitive global order? I want to hear your perspective. Do you believe America's debt path is manageable through growth and reform, or are we witnessing the early stages of a long-term redistribution of economic influence? Share your thoughts in the comments. Serious analysis requires serious discussion. At GEO Economic Insight, we focus on connecting geopolitics, monetary systems, and history into one continuous narrative. Because the future of global leadership will not be decided by headlines alone. It will be shaped by structural forces moving quietly beneath the surface of the global economy. Stay informed, stay analytical, and watch the signals that others ignore.